Welcome back to On Dog Terms. I'm your host, MJ, and today we're diving into a topic that so many dog owners struggle with, resource guarding. Whether it's food, toys, or even a favorite spot on the couch, resource guarding can be a serious challenge, and knowing how to handle it the right way is key to keeping everyone safe and building trust with your dog. To help us break it all down, I'm joined by Skyler Gingrich, a professional dog trainer and the owner of Redemption Dog Training in Aztec, New Mexico. Skyler specializes in aggression cases and has helped countless dogs overcome resource guarding and other serious behavior challenges. We're going to talk about what resource guarding really is, why dogs do it, and most importantly, how you can address it in a way that works. So let's get into it. Welcome to On Dog Terms. I'm MJ, a professional dog trainer dedicated to helping you navigate life with your dog without the overwhelm or frustration. Whether you're struggling with behavior issues, looking for effective training strategies, or just want to better understand your dog, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about practical, no-nonsense training advice that makes living with your dog easier and more enjoyable. Join me as we dive into real-world training tips, expert insights, and everything you need to build a better relationship with your dog. Because with the right approach, training doesn't have to feel like a struggle. It can be a path to real progress and a more enjoyable life together.
Skyler,
Hi.
I already told everybody a little bit about you, but do you want to tell us where you are and what you do?
I am currently in Aztec, New Mexico. I specialize in behavioral issues. I do a lot of lessons. I've started to get into more of detection kind of stuff. I'm going to do some online lessons and online classes, which is going to be exciting.
Oh, so like group classes online? Ooh, that's fun. You'll have to tell me how that goes. That's exciting. I would like to not leave my house anymore, so let me know how that goes and maybe I'll do that.
Yeah, I feel that.
Okay, so we're talking about resource guarding today, and you like the bitey, naughty, to more aggressive type behavior. So I figured you're the perfect person to talk to about this. So for all of the people listening that don't know, what is resource guarding? And like a basic, simple sentence.
Okay, simple and hard because resource guarding can be really up to the dog as far as what they decide that resource is. So it can be you. It can be your other dog. The most common one is food, obviously. I've seen dogs do it to like a specific corner of the house.
They're taking possession, right?
Yeah, they feel
Okay.
like they own that thing.
Because I hear a lot of clients will call me and they'll be like, my dog is very protective of me. And personally, I don't like that word. Do you find protective and resource guarding maybe thought of the same thing when they're not?
Yeah, there are some dogs that can be like naturally protective. Like I've seen that, but a lot of times absolutely not. They just think that you are theirs and that they can decide where you go, who gets to touch you, and basically control your entire life.
I find that when people call me when it's a problem for them, they're like, oh, my dog is being protective of me. I think that word makes them think it's cute. So they'll be like, oh, it's really sweet. And I love that she's protective of me. And I have to break it to them. I'm like, no, your dog is being very rude and they're being very possessive over you and they're trying to control you. And then that changes the way that people think about that behavior, even though the behavior hasn't changed.
Yeah, I tell a lot of people it's like being in a toxic relationship.
That's a
That
good way to put
person
it.
wants to control you. That's what your dog is different.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Okay, so you said food. Food is probably the most common, right? I mean, everybody thinks of resource guarding as the dog hovering over their dog bowl and growling. Toys, treats, people, space, furniture. Like my German Shepherd, Grim, who you know well, he's a resource guarder. He will resource guard the water bowl from the other dogs, but it's only when he's drinking from it. So not just the water bowl in the kitchen, it's if he's drinking from it. And to a degree, I think that's fair a little bit. Like I wouldn't want to be crowded if I was eating. So when we talk about resource guarding, I think we automatically think of it as a bad behavior, but there's a spectrum and there's kind of a natural behavior to possess something. And then there's where it becomes a problem. Do you think that resource guarding is always bad?
No, definitely not. It's definitely like a natural thing that dogs do. Almost all dogs, I would say certain dogs don't, but almost all dogs have something that they will actually have possession of, show you in some way that it is theirs, whether it's from you or from another dog. And I don't let my dog take toys from each other if my one dog is gonna growl at the other one and say, no, this is mine, I'm 100% allowing that.
Where do you find that line? Like, when does it go from being normal, appropriate, natural possessiveness to a resource guarding problem?
The problem comes in when it becomes dangerous. Obviously, like, it becomes a problem before that, but that's when people call us, right? They call us once the dog is actually showing some signs that it might do something about that.
Or it stops people from living their lives naturally. Like they're walking around their house on tiptoes, or they have to micromanage everything because they're nervous of what would happen if they don't. So like, you know, like I said, my shepherd's a resource guarder. So I let him resource guard the water bowl while he's drinking because I wouldn't want to be crowded while I'm drinking water either. I let him, his crate is his. None of the other dogs are allowed to go in it. If he is actively chewing on a bone, none of the other dogs are allowed to take it. That's fair. But if he's walking up to another dog, hovering over them and trying to steal their toy, that's inappropriate. Or if he were to, he doesn't do this, but actually, here's a real life example of something he did once. There was a cupcake wrapper on the coffee table, not his, human. And one of the other dogs walked by and he like leaped in the middle and growled. To me, that's inappropriate. That's not yours to guard. So there's definitely a fairness aspect of it. And that's where we have to get into advocating for our dogs, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the episode. But I kind of want your opinion on something. Do you think resource guarding is a genetic trait, like something that the dog has and we can't get rid of? Or do you think it's learned, or both?
Both.
Both.
100% both. Because I have raised dogs myself, and I raise puppies like a pro. Like, I am the pro at raising puppies, and I have seen them resource guard. And it is one of those things that they just have. And then some of them definitely learn it. Like my shepherd, Lucifer. My one dog is super obnoxious about licking everybody's bowls after they're done. Well, he decided that was not something that he was a fan of. So now he picks up his food bowl and walks away with it.
This is mine.
Yeah.
That's funny. So there's like that spectrum again of not just what a dog will guard, but whether or not they will at all. I think like there are some dogs that I think on the spectrum of resource guarding, they have it so little that you will probably never see it no matter what you do. It kind of drives me up a wall a little bit when people talk about, oh, when my dog was a puppy, I would put my hand in the food bowl and mess with their food bowl. Therefore, they don't resource guard now. And I'm always so tempted to tell them, well, odds are they never would. Like they probably just didn't have a strong trait for that, because you doing that would absolutely cause the resource guarding if they did. With learned resource guarding, the dog probably has to have a little bit of that genetic tendency to do so. But absolutely, if they learn, oh, I hover over the bone that I have and I growl and people get nervous and back up, or I growl and the other dog walks away, it works. So why wouldn't they do it again? Do you find, is there any breeds that you find do it more than others?
German Shepherds are really well known for their resource guarding. Honestly, Shepherds and like herding type breed tend to have more of that possessive kind of feeling about them, where they're like, this is my thing, and they're willing to take it further.
For all of those shepherd people listening, don't leave us now. Skyler and I have shepherds. We love them, but it is
We
true
adore
fact
them.
that we adore them. They're our favorite, but they are jerks about this. So they're on the list.
Yeah.
I find spaniels a lot. Like not always, but I've had a lot of spaniels resource guard too. So, okay, here's a common myth I found on the internet. I want to get your take on it. Resource guarding is a sign of dominance.
Dominance is such a hard word in dog training. Yes and no. Like, sometimes, yes, because the dog is literally like taking possession of that thing, which is by definition dominating. Sometimes the dog is doing it because they're insecure, because they're like, this person has stuck her hands in my food bowl 14 times and I'm over it. And like, I don't feel secure to eat my food anymore. So I think it can be by the actual definition of dominance, not by the, like, your dog is trying to take over your wife thing, whatever people think it is.
I think people take resource guarding very personally. The clients that I have, when their dog is resource guarding, they take it as a personal offense, like their dog is trying to be in charge of them and dominate them, and they get really offended and upset by it. And I have to remind them, like, this is a natural behavior for your dog. It is very normal. Your dog is trying to figure out what they can take responsibility over and what they cannot. It is not about you. The things you do are going to influence that, which we'll talk about, but it's not just your dog being a jerk to you for the heck of it. It's a natural dog thing.
Yeah, dogs they're not just jerks to anybody or anything for the heck of it. I don't think there's always a reason behind what they're doing.
I've had a couple dogs that I feel like are just jerks. They're rare. Like in my 10 years of doing this, I could count them on my hand, but
Right.
they're very, very rare. It's pretty rare to find a truly dominant dog. People like to say that too. Oh, my dog's very dominant, but it's really rare. Most dogs can be pushy. They could be insecure. They could, like my shepherd, just likes conflict. He's not trying to be the boss of anybody. He just likes to stir the pot. But those truly dominant dogs are pretty rare. I don't see them super often.
Yep.
Here's another question you're probably going to hate because it depends. The word can vary. But another myth I found on the internet that I wanted your take on is only aggressive dogs resource guard.
Absolutely not. And all dogs have a capacity for aggression. Could resource guarding be considered aggressive? Yes. Is it always? No. Because I guarantee you that Susan's fluffy dog who has never done anything to anybody ever probably takes its treat into the other room. And that could be considered resource guarding.
Yeah, absolutely. When you hand your dog a treat and they run into the living room to go enjoy it in peace over there, that's resource guarding. They're going, this is mine. I'm going to go over here and enjoy it in peace without you. And that's totally appropriate. I think that the word aggressive, people use it as a label, like the dog is either aggressive or not, when it's really just a word we use to describe certain behaviors. So like I could be aggressive on certain days, and there are other days where I'm not aggressive at all. So it just depends. Going back to like, where is that line between appropriate and inappropriate resource guarding? Just like you said, it's usually when it becomes dangerous, right? So like my shepherd, he's a resource guarder. Minus that one cupcake wrapper incident that was random, which I was just like, you cannot do that. That's not yours. For the most part, I don't say we have a resource guarding problem. It is very, very there, but it's not a problem. So for those listening, an example, when I prepare the dog's food bowls, I feed them all in the same room. They're like 10 feet apart. They're not right next to each other. When I'm preparing their dinner, my shepherd will come and he'll sit very politely on like the edge of the kitchen. And if the other dogs come up behind him, he will turn around and stare. He does not growl. He does not snarl. He does not put his hair up. There's nothing, but he stares. And they will all kind of look at the ground awkwardly and walk away. That is resource guarding. He's pushing them away from the food because he wants to be the first to get it. But it's not inappropriate per se. Could I fix it? Sure. But it's not going past that line of dangerous. The other dogs respond very well to it. They go, okay, we hear you, and we'll back up, and it doesn't cause problems.
I think you brought up something really good in the fact of like dogs who understand appropriate body language and can also convey appropriate body language don't tend to have the issues as far as the resource guarding stuff goes.
Yeah. And now that you say that, when I think about it, most of the resource guarding that I get called for is directed towards the humans, not other dogs. Most dogs read each other's body language fairly well, and they will figure it out and go, okay, like not worth it. Whereas it's the humans that don't listen super well, and that's where we have a problem.
Yeah, if your dog is staring you down, you don't know necessarily, I should back up.
Yeah. Or like there is a time and a place. So like I don't mind that my shepherd resource guards with the other dogs in the house. I really don't mind that he resource guards at the vet. So well, not a vet, but we go to acupuncture once a month. In the beginning, she would put down like a lick mat for him. And after the first time, she didn't see it, but I did. When she went to pick it up, he had a certain look and I redirected him. So now every time that we do that, I tell her, hey, I'm going to pick it up, and I pick it up because I can do that, and I hand it to her and it's no big deal. I don't mind that he does it with other people because I can manage him so well, but it would be a very different story if I couldn't take something from him. Not that I make a habit of it, which I have something we're going to talk about later in the episode on that, but it's important to be able to handle your dog and take unsafe things away from them. So it usually is the humans that we're having an issue with, not dogs. Another note that I wanted to bring up there that you kind of sparked the thought in my head was that A lot of people have this idea in their head that resource guarding is always a one-way street, that there will be like a top dog in the household, for lack of better terms, and that dog is always going to be top of the totem pole. I've got 4 dogs in my house, and there's a little bit of resource guarding with everybody, and they respect each other very well, right? So far, I've talked about my big jerk of a shepherd, but if my older dog has something, the shepherd won't go up and take it because the older dog will give him, that little snarl. My shepherd goes, okay, that's yours, back off. When it comes to the ball outside, the black lab at our house is top dog for sure. The shepherd will not go after the ball if she's like, nope, that's mine. So there's some give and take. There is relationships there. It's not always one dog being the bully.
Yeah, I've got 3 in my house right now, and all of them, they've all got their things that or theirs specifically. I think my border collie mix is the worst, and she is highly managed.
Coconut?
Yeah. Coconut is not right in her head. So I'm just going to put that out there for everybody. Like, this dog is not a normal person's dog. This is not a dog that should be with a normal person. So, but yeah, she's a resource guarder. You've gotten a lot better. I've done a lot of management and you've done a lot of work, but she will always be dangerous to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm. So so let's say pet owners, they're experiencing resource guarding with their dog. When would you recommend they seek professional help?
As soon as they get that feeling in their stomach where they go, this might be an issue. Don't wait for your dog to bite you.
Right. Yes. Please don't wait for your dog to bite you guys, because once they bite you, they know they can. So it's very likely that once the dog has bit you once, it'll happen again. We would rather avoid that. I'll also say sometimes I'll recommend it if people see how do I say this? In young puppies, if we're seeing a lot of kind of exaggerated, really big snarls, really big growls, really big hovering over something in young puppies, that's a little bit of a red flag to me. I like people to get on top of that soon, because that takes a lot of confidence for a young puppy to do that. So young puppies, like under 6 months, if we're seeing it at all, usually I like to just get a professional in there to make sure things don't go bad. But if it's just a little bit here and there and you don't feel unsafe at all, you can probably start to tackle it at home, doing your research well. Skyler and I are going to help you out a little bit on what to do. But if you're unsure in any way, find a trainer that you trust.
Yeah. If you feel weird, call somebody.
Call 2 people. Call 3 people. Get different opinions.
Yeah.
Okay. Their dog is resource guarding. They're getting that feeling in their gut. They find a professional trainer for help. Usually I'm going to start with safety, right? Because if a dog is a safety risk, our first thing is getting everybody safe. So tell me, when you go to people's houses or you're working with them on resource guarding, what types of things are you having them put in place to make sure that dogs and humans are all safe?
So before I even meet with people, we try and go through and figure out what the dog is actually resource guarding, because a lot of times people don't realize it's as many things as it actually is. They'll just be like, oh, like Fluffy growled at me over the food bowl. But then it turns out that Fluffy also has his favorite chair that nobody else is allowed to sit in, or I can get in the bed, but my husband can't get in the bed. I need to tell him to get out before my husband can get in the bed. So yeah, honestly, when it comes to resource guarding, I'm a big fan of take it all away kind of person. I am a dogs go off furniture, they stop getting free things. It becomes an earn your life kind of situation until I can get in there.
You're on TikTok, right?
Yeah.
TikTok is back, by the way, as of like an hour ago.
I saw that.
There's this dog on TikTok. I think they're on Instagram too. And it's like a kind of cute, funny, people laugh at it video. I think it's like a pointer type thing. And every video is that the dog is in bed with the woman. And her husband comes in and the husband cannot get the dog out of the bed and the dog growls at him. And finally the wife will tell the dog to move. And it's cute. Like, people laugh at it. And it's become this whole series of videos. That is resource guarding though. So like if you're watching this and you find those videos, or you know what videos I'm talking about, that's resource guarding. Now, is it inappropriate? If it's not causing them a problem, one could say no. From a professional trainer's point of view, I bet there's a couple other things going on that they might not notice. So it's not a problem yet, but it could snowball into one. So you had mentioned taking things away. So what exactly are you referring to taking it all away?
First, no furniture. Second, we're not pre-feeding anymore. If your dog is pre-feeding, we're not pre-feeding anymore. Honestly, like anything your dog has that's free. If your dog has toys all over the house, those are getting put out. We're going to make space like I have all of the things that I give them to you. And we're going to work on that relationship. Because it tends to be a relationship issue between the human and the dog.
So we're going to get into routine and lifestyle stuff in a minute. But do you require people to muzzle train at all?
It depends.
It depends. That's fine. That's a good answer because it does depend. Like I don't do it with everybody. But let's say we have a dog that we did need to muzzle train. When do you have them wear it? I mean, it's going to depend on the dog always, right? But do you have a specific type of muzzle that you like? Are you hesitant to put a muzzle on a dog? Are you super pro putting a muzzle on a dog? Like, tell me your thoughts on muzzles.
I love muzzles. I adore muzzles. You and I got the same muzzle from the same person, I think, at one point.
Skyler and I went out with our matching shepherds and our matching muzzles in public, and we're big muzzle advocates back in the day. We both lived in Denver. We used to live in Denver. That's how we met.
Yeah. No, I love muzzles. I love big basket muzzles where they have lots of room to pant. I like them to have some sort of way to take treats of some sorts. But with resource guarders, I do actually change that sometimes if they do resource guard food. And I usually get the clients to get started. I get them started on muzzle training. I don't like to start muzzle training on the dog because the dog doesn't know me. And being a complete stranger, like shoving something on their nose.
Especially like I'm a big advocate for muzzle training, and specifically when I'm getting called for resource guarding that is directed at the dog's humans, I'm pickier about the muzzles. I always prefer a basket muzzle that is big enough the dog can open their mouth, pant. I usually prefer they can drink water and take treats through it. With resource guarding, if the dog is a danger, and even if there's that little bit of me that's like it could be, like it hasn't been dangerous yet, but it could be, I would much rather always us be safe, because the other thing is once the dog bites the human, now the human has a big hesitancy, right? And that can cause us issues. Like the muzzles to be bite proof. Like the Baskerville muzzles are the most popular ones out there, but a dog can get you through those. They're not totally bite proof. I want it to be something that the dog can't grab your pants or grab your sleeve or get your finger through. Those are usually going to be for more of my extreme cases. Like I said, if I really think it's dangerous, most of the time I'm hoping somebody reaches out to us before it gets to that point. But muzzles will keep you safe in the house. So don't be ashamed to have your dog wear one. Do it safely. And then I'm sure that you use like leashes and crates and pet gates for management. Because usually before we even work on training, we're just managing and keeping everybody safe and keeping everybody from doing bad habits.
I'm a huge advocate for gating your house as much as you possibly can, if we're being really honest. Especially if you have a multiple kind of animal situation. Just because it makes life so much easier for you and for your pets to be able to close something quickly.
Mm-hmm. So it's funny that you say that, because remember the cupcake wrapper incident I was telling you about earlier? So that happened shortly after I moved. Like right after we moved, I moved into this new house. And I was like, Grim doesn't need his crate anymore. It's so hard when you're a dog trainer to work with your own dogs because you forget all your professional things, right? I'm really great with other people's dogs, and sometimes I do stupid things with my own. So I was like, I don't need his crate anymore. So I folded it up. I put it in the basement. He did not have a crate in the house. He loves his crate. I don't know why I did this, because the cupcake wrapper incident happened and I called Sam, my usual co-host. And I'm like, what gives? Like, what is wrong with my dog? It's never been this bad. And she's asking me questions. Like I'm kind of calling her like my personal dog trainer. And I don't know how it came up, but I mentioned I put his crate in the basement. And she's like, MJ, why would you do that? And I'm like, he doesn't need it. And she's like, he loves his crate. And as soon as I brought the crate back up and put it back up for him, resource guarding significantly went down. It wasn't a problem anymore. People think the crate and the pet gates and the playpens are very limiting to our dogs, and people want to give our dogs a lot of freedom. Too much freedom can be overwhelming, and some dogs really like a space of their own. So imagine that you lived in a house with a bunch of roommates, but you didn't have your own room, and you just had to be with everybody all the time. You're gonna get cranky. So having separate areas where your pet can go decompress and just be by themselves and where they can say, I want to be left alone, please don't let anybody bother me, can help significantly with resource guarding.
Yeah, it's really helpful for them to have some sort of like monk-downs are almost never in their crate, but they've got crates all over the house. This one case.
Yeah. And I mean, when I say I brought Grimm's crate back up from the basement, I literally just placed it in my bedroom. I hardly ever shut the door. He goes in and he lays down, and I don't let anybody bother him while he's in there, human or dog, but just having that space of his own made him feel like he could relax. So now let's get into like, okay, we've made sure that we're safe. We're going to get into tackling the resource guarding. Usually, at least the way that I start things is going to be more routine and lifestyle oriented than necessarily just coming in and training a specific skill. People think of dog training like you're teaching a sit or you're teaching a spin or a trick type of thing. Usually it's going to come down to lifestyle and routine stuff first. So you already mentioned having the gates up, having separate areas, taking things away. Do you restrict dogs' access to anything other than their objects like space or rooms?
It depends on what the dog is doing, but a lot of times I want the dog to be within eyesight of the person if they're out. They were dealing with like some sort of routine-esque resource guarding. I want the dog to be within sight of the person so the person can actually be watching the dog.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they can be doing things that you don't know about. Like your dog could be resource guarding to your cat if you have one. And you would never know because cats know to like get away from things. But if you don't know that it's happening, then you can't be a part of changing it.
And I will preach every day that the more your dog practices something, the better they get at it. So if your dog's doing resource guarding behind your back when you're not looking, they're getting better at it and the habit's getting stronger. Now, what about, so like people hate me as their dog trainer when it comes to this one thing. My clients love me. I try really hard to be lovable, but sometimes you just have to tell them the hard truth. So like, I do not mind dogs on furniture. My dog sleeps on my bed with me. My dogs are allowed on my sofa. 99% of the time, I do not care if my client's pets are on furniture unless we have a resource guarder. Do you agree?
I do, because there's something about it that like, if the dog is allowed on the furniture and on the bed and all of that, at least in the beginning, that if you take that away, it really does help solidify for the dog that like, hey, we're not doing this game anymore.
The way that I never say the dog can never have that back, right? My goal is always within what is realistic for that dog to give as much freedom back as possible. But often to get there, we have to take away freedoms first. And the way that I describe it to my clients is we need to take a couple steps back so that we can make it very, very clear to your dog what is their responsibility and possession and what is not. And in order to make that very clear, I'm using restricted access to furniture. So my bed is not yours. The sofa is not yours. Eventually, when we start to build better habits and you get a better idea of what is. So my dog's crate is his. I don't stick my hands in and bother him. Other people don't. The other dogs aren't allowed in it. Your food bowl, which we're going to talk about food in a minute, while you are eating, I will not mess with it. Your bone, when I have given it to you, I will not mess with it. But the sofa is mine. You cannot growl at me over it. Eventually, I want to be able to invite you up onto the sofa and have you be a respectful guest up here, but it's not yours to take possession of.
What? Yeah, I get.
Yeah. So people hate that because I get it. You want to have your dogs on the furniture. It's really hard not to, but that is just the hard.
Beds. It's the beds that get people every single time.
It is.
You're like, oh, your dog can't sleep in bed with you until we get this finished or until we get to a place where they can sleep in bed with you again. And they get pretty sad about that.
Yeah, that or, I mean, they do get really sad. Like that's an emotional one, the bed. The sofa I find is more of an inconvenience. They're like, well, how do I keep him off the sofa? And I'm like, well, supervise and put him on a leash. And when you're not home, he doesn't have access to the living room. And that's just too hard for people. Yeah, I'm always very, very upfront with my clients when they call me about resource guarding because I don't want to take their money if it's not going to work. When I have somebody call me with a resource guarder, I tell them, I'm like, look, of all the dog problems that people call me for, resource guarding is usually the least successful because it's the least fun to work through because you have to limit so much and you have to have rules and boundaries and you have to be disciplined yourself. And people fall off the bandwagon, so it doesn't work. So usually it's the people where it has gotten to the point where it's dangerous or where they feel unsafe, then they do the work. But up until that point, people have a really hard time setting those boundaries. Let's go back. You had mentioned feeding. So you were going to take away access to just free feeding. What do you do for feeding schedule for dogs that are resource guarders?
So it also depends on like how bad the dog is. If the dog is gonna attack you for being anywhere in his bowl, I'm not gonna ask you to start hand feeding. I know that's a big thing that you do, but I'm not gonna ask somebody to start hand feeding right away because I find that it gives them like real big anxiety.
Oh, yeah, fair.
So I don't want that involved in all of that. A lot of times I'll just tell them like, hey, like we're gonna put the food bowl down, we're gonna leave the room, and then we're gonna let them have their food. Like they can be safe in that space for a while. And that's where I start with it. I usually start with give the dog the bowl, leave the room. Everybody's out of the room. No other animals, no anything. I want the dog to feel safe with their food for a while.
Yeah, fair.
And
It's funny you say that because weirdly, I am a big hand feeder, except for resource guarding.
really,
I do. Yeah, I do agree with you on that. I want the dog and the human to both learn to leave the dog alone while they eat. Like I want the human to learn to back off and let them eat in peace. Because if you put a big cheesecake in front of me and you told me it was mine and I'm eating it and my husband comes over and starts chowing down, I'm going to get pissed. I want the human to get good at the habit of leaving the dog alone. I also want the dog to learn how to relax with their food. So usually I have them feed in the crate or in a playpen. I do coach them through how to then get the bowl out because I don't want them reaching into the crate and grabbing the dog bowl. So usually I'll have them, okay, the dog eats. I usually set a timer. So you have 15 minutes to eat your food. Whether you're done or not, you're like 15 minutes, that's your time. Then, okay, if we have a dog that resource guards the food bowl, now the dog is going to come out of the crate, go in another room, go outside for a potty break, and then the human can remove the bowl while the dog is not present.
yeah, I will say super extreme resource guarding cases, I will not do as a lesson. I will send to people who do boarding camps. Extreme resource guarding cases, because it is so dangerous, I will not do lessons with.
Fair. Sam and I had talked about that in another episode. We talked about when we recommend a board and train and when we recommend private lessons. Any type of severe problem, we always recommend a board and train because it is dangerous work. And to someone who's not a professional, you're very likely to get hurt. Having a professional do that hard work, not all of it, because there's a lot of relationship stuff we have to go in and fix. But having a trainer get us to a point where they can safely handle your dog and now teach you how to is good. So if you do feel unsafe out there and a trainer tells you to do a board and train, they're not just trying to steal all your money. I know board and trains are really expensive, but it's a good idea for this type of thing.
Yeah, I'm talking about dogs who maul people. Like if your dog has like gotten a pretty extreme bite over something, it's probably a board and train situation because that was my first thought when you were talking about the crate was like, oh, that sounds so scary.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is. And I try to work with people because board and trains are really expensive usually. And I mean, rightfully so. Like, I'm not saying the dog trainer shouldn't charge. If a dog is living with you, you're on duty 24/7. Like, you're not getting time off because the dog's safety and well-being, and it's your responsibility to work the dog. And it's dangerous in this scenario. But there are some people that truly can't afford that. And if it comes down to, well, I need to figure something out, or this dog goes to a shelter, and likely if the dog goes to the shelter, they're going to get put down because a rescue or a shelter cannot ethically rehome a dog that they know is a danger. Sometimes I will do private lessons. Like I've got a couple clients that I'm doing resource guarding with right now in private lessons, but none of the dogs have posed a serious risk yet. So there's been a couple little nips, but no like blood drawn, no scarring, no ER trips, right? I do try to find ways to help people. So I will teach them, like before we get into any type of training, I'm teaching them the routine and lifestyle of how to live safely with their dog. Usually, let's say I've got a really bad resource guarder around food. The dog is going to be somewhere else in the house. You're going to put the bowl down in their playpen, in their crate. You're going to let the dog go in there and shut the door. And for some people, like I had one person once where they couldn't even shut the door to the crate because they couldn't get near the crate. Fine. Put the bowl of food in the crate, let the dog into the room. The dog goes in, you go out. give them 20 minutes. And with that dog, what we could do is the dog really loved to play. So we would just call the dog out of the room and out into the yard. We'd play with them for a couple minutes. We'd leave the dog out there to do his business. We'd go and remove the bowl when he wasn't present. People could then do it, feed him safely. But stuff like that's important because, yeah, that can be scary to people. Like, don't reach into the crate and grab the bowl, please.
Yeah, there definitely ways to figure things out. But yeah, putting a hand effort to stay in them.
Don't ever put your hands in dog crates, and teach your kids not to do it either. No little fingers in the crate. I saw a video once. Somebody let their toddler crawl into their dog's crate and lay on top of them. And I was like, please don't do that. What about when it comes to like areas of the house? Like, do you ever have people tell a dog they can't go in a certain area of the house?
Absolutely. Kitchens are big as far as especially non-CD food resource guarding. One of the first things we're going to teach that dog is how to not come in the kitchen if we can at all, or how to get out of the kitchen when told to. The same for furniture. I had one dog, he got in exactly one corner of the house. We still don't know why. It is just the one corner of the couch. It was just one specific corner of the couch that it was weird about. But yeah, we taught the dog that it just wasn't allowed to go in that room for a while until we could deal with some stuff.
The kitchen's usually the obvious one. I have this thing with resource guarding where usually, not always, but usually when we have a resource guarding problem directed towards the humans, there is a relationship issue going on between dog and human. So boundaries are a really big thing for me. I do want to talk about boundaries when I get to like the training, because I feel like we're in management mode right now. I want to get to training mode in a little bit. But I do recommend that everybody that has a resource guarder, you pick one room in the house and that room is off limits, just for the sake of having somewhere the dog does not have a right to. It can be a random bathroom. People with kids or like young kids, I really like the nursery. Nursery's off limits. Kitchen, something, it could be your laundry room, something silly where I want you to have the ability to tell your dog to stay back. Even if that room is like, it could be the laundry room, and let's say the dog doesn't resource guard in there. Okay, but if you still don't have any area of your house that you can tell your dog, nope, this isn't yours, back off. How on earth are you going to tell them to back off of something they do think is theirs? So I always recommend one room. It can be something stupid and silly like the bathroom, but one room.
Yeah, no, that's great.
So now let's get into the training portion. Okay, so we've kept everybody safe. We've worked on management. We've changed a couple of lifestyle things. In regards to like traditional, what people think of when they think of dog training, what do you teach the dog?
So you're talking obedience.
Not necessarily. It could just be a skill.
Okay. I like to teach the dog, number one, how to lay down. Like lay down is probably the number one thing that I like the most dog.
Okay.
Because if the dog does resource guard, whatever it is, you can tell the dog, hey, I want you to lay down. So say they're like food bowl and you say, okay, I want you to lay down before you like get to the food bowl. This is all teaching them how to actually like control themselves around this thing that they feel so frantic.
Right.
So I guess it could be anything. It could be lay down, it could be sit, whatever. I like lay down because it puts the dog into the mindset of like calmly down. And I feel like the body does that to the mind by itself. If you teach a dog how to have a nice, calm lay down, then their mind actually starts to lay down with it.
Okay.
So that's where I start. I like dogs to learn to lay down, and I like them to learn to back off.
Okay. Tell me about
Which
that.
is kind of what you said with, that's kind of what you said with the having a room.
Right.
I think it's the same concept.
I think it is, because I usually start like when I'm just going over, okay, we're going to change a couple things about how you live with your dog. We're going to start with one room. But then I really like, I call it a boundary. The human should have the ability to tell the dog to back off of anything. It could be a bathroom. Like I usually start with a clear line of a room. The kitchen, like where the carpet turns to tile. The doorway of a bathroom. The doorway of a nursery. Like I start there because it's easier. But then like I want to get to a point where I can walk over food that fell on the floor and tell my dog to back up and they back up. Or I walk over to, let's say I have a guest sitting on the sofa and my dog is angry that they're on the sofa. I should be able to walk in between them and tell them, hey, back off. They are not your responsibility. They're good. You need to back up. So I do teach like a boundary, which is basically your ability to tell your dog to back up and give space.
Right.
I think that's what you mean by that, right?
I do the exact same thing. It's literally just back up. Like, I don't care what I'm doing. I don't care what you're doing. If I tell you to back up, like, I want you to take 2 steps back.
And then we want to make sure it should stay even when you turn your back, right? Because people they'll walk towards the dog will back up, and then they bend down to pick something up, or they turn their back and the dog rushes forward. It's like, no. Your job is to back up until I tell you otherwise. Like, until I tell you you're good, this area is off limit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important. And a lot of that is just like body pressure to the dog. You just walk into the dog. I definitely met dogs where you can walk right into them and they're just like,
they melt. Golden retrievers.
That was my butt.
It's always golden retrievers. You walk, they're being set, and you walk right up to them and they let you walk into them, and then they like hold their butt and melt to the floor.
Yep.
Always golden. I love Goldens too, guys. Okay. They're silly, fun puppy dogs. What about, do you do any type of desensitization with resource guarding?
Yes. Yeah. I do a ton of desensitization. I want it to become like a normal part of things. The most recent one, the dog was a sock dog where it would grab the socks, and those were his socks. And so I literally had them go outside and he threw socks all over the yard. So we threw socks all over the yard, and literally like the dog would grab a sock and it would be awesome. And I'd be like, okay, go get that sock. That sock is way better than that sock that they've got right there. And they need the sock. And the dog got that sock. Okay, well, by the end of it, the dog was like, wow, I don't even care about socks.
That's the thing too. Some dogs, there's scarcity. If there's not enough of something, they'll resource guard it. But then if you have too much of something, they're like, okay, well, this isn't so interesting anymore.
Yep.
That's fun. I would have liked to have been a fly on the wall for the sock in the yard lesson.
Well, I liked it was more of like relationship thing. Like I wanted the dog to learn that people were fun, the socks weren't.
I like with puppies specifically, let's say I have a puppy where there's like little signs. Okay, we might have resource guarding start. I will like right away, never put my hand in the food bowl, never take the food bowl away while they're eating, but I will start just so nonchalantly when they're eating, I will just walk past and drop something better.
Right.
Here you go. Here's a piece of beef long. Every time I walk by your bowl, something amazing happens, so that they are not stressed about me approaching with their bowl or me taking anything. It's like, oh, here she comes. What do I get now? And I want that because if it was an adult only household, just don't ever stick your hand in the dog bowl. Like, leave the dog alone. But I want to prepare puppies for kids. Kids don't always listen. They should. Like, I will tell you 5 million times, if you have a resource guarder, you've got to manage your kids. But I still want to take away the stress of people walking by. Because like in my house, my dogs just eat in the dining room. Like, I just put the bowls down. When they're done eating, I pick them up. So people are walking around the house. I don't want that to stress them out.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
What about, I know that it's very popular for people to teach dogs a trade. So here, give me that. I'll give you this. What do you think of that?
I think training is really useful when you're starting out.
I agree. I take it a step farther. It's not my end goal. I go somewhere with it, but it's not the end goal.
Yeah, I think training is really useful when you're starting out. But I think the end goal should be for the dog to drop something if you tell them to spit it out or whatever it is. But training can be really useful, and it's really good in a punch. If your dog grabs something that they have never seen before, for example, I just moved to the country and there weren't random, like elk bones in Denver. Oh, okay. My dog got really, really excited about that. 2 of my dogs dropped the bones, like no problem. I told them drop it. And Coconut, because she was like, this is mine. And I was like, okay, cool. Here's this other thing, and threw a bunch, I think it was beef heart, on the ground. And she was like, oh, well, I can eat that immediately. Yeah, it's good in a punch, and it's definitely useful starting out.
I like to build on it. In the beginning, in the pinch, I would much rather you trade your dog than fight them for it or have a bad scenario, or even just the social pressure of reaching to grab something is really unpleasant for most dogs. So that's where I start. But I like people to have fun with their dogs, right? Resource guarding is not a very fun thing to work through. I try to find areas to add fun. So I say in the beginning, we're going to teach your dog a trick. We're going to teach them to fetch, to go pick something up, to bring it to you, and to give it to you. The end goal is I don't want you to tell your dog to drop it and have them drop it, and then they're hovering over it and you have to reach for it, or even they drop it and then you enforce a boundary and you tell them to back up and they're like, God damn it, that sucks. Like, I'm going to back up and she's going to take it. I would rather the dog learn to bring it and actually give it to you willingly. And I pay them heavily in the beginning. But what I find is that when you get the muscle memory of that down and they've been paid for giving you things so many times, after a while, it's not stressful anymore. So like my shepherd, when he has something, he doesn't often take things he's not supposed to, but we give him, when we empty a peanut butter jar and like that's last the peanut butter, I'll just give one of the dogs the whole jar and they lick out the whole jar and eventually it's empty and like chewed up. And instead of picking it up, instead of asking him to leave the room, I'm at a point where I can just say, hey, Grim, fetch. And he'll go get it and he'll bring it to me and he'll give it to me. And he's so happy to do it. I don't even pay him anymore. Sometimes I do just for the heck of like variable reinforcement, I will, but I don't have to because we've done it so many times. And he's like, oh, sure, no problem. What a cool trick I can do. And it's not stressful. So I like people to get to that point where instead of just drop it, you can actually ask your dog to willingly give it to you. And that's not always possible. Like that's going to depend on the temperament of the dog a little bit, but that's where I start with it. And I will start with things that are not the object the dog's resource guarding. If the dog is resource guarding their food bowl, I don't go pick up your food bowl and give it to me. One dog, we just did a wooden spoon. Like it was something random. The dog, it was from the dollar store. It had no food smells on it. It was just to teach the skill and create a good relationship around the dog handing the human thing. And then we work our way to the tennis ball. And this dog did not resource guard socks. So I actually just tied some tube socks underneath the ball and we practiced with that. So we generalized the skill of giving us things just to take the bad feelings out of that act, minus the object they're resource guarding first. Is there anything else you can think of that you do regularly with resource guarders? Not just that one-off weird case, but like something you almost always do?
So after we do all of these things to prepare the dog, I will actually put them in both situations. And in both, you are listening and you do not have a dog trainer, please do not fetch your dog out without having some sort of plan in place. You have to have a plan. Number one, your plan needs to be, what happens if everything goes completely right? What are you going to do? What happens if everything goes completely wrong? What are you going to do? And I will set the dog up in the situation, in the things that the dog resource guards, whatever it is. I like to actually like replay things that have happened. So if the dog went after Joe while it was eating at 5:00 p.m., I want to recreate that thing as closely as possible and have that exact moment again. And then we have a plan. What happens if it goes right? What happens if it goes wrong? What do they do? What do I do? Everybody knows their role in this scenario. I like to recreate that scenario for both the person and the dog because I want both of them to have a different view of how that ends.
Do you find that people ever get nervous doing that? If you had a client where they've had a bad experience with their dog and then you ask them to recreate it like that after doing some training and they have that, I'm not sure.
Yep. Almost always. I mean, if it was a bite in any kind, like people generally get nervous about it. So we can get to that too. So we can do it with a muzzle on first. Like we don't have to go straight to, okay, we're going to do this all the way. But it can be like, okay, your dog has a muzzle on. We're going to recreate that scenario. We're going to have a plan for it. And then we can work up to that.
Or it could even just be like the baby step of the scenario, right? Like, okay, we don't start by, we did 2 days of training on all these random things and now we're going to go straight back to the hard one. Yeah. It's like, okay, he lunged at Joe at 5 p.m. over his dinner bowl when Joe walked into the room. Well, let's just make sure Joe can walk into the room without a food bowl. Let's make sure Joe can walk into the room with an empty food bowl. Let's make sure that we can just work on the dog changing how it feels about Joe approaching the doorway. Like we can baby step that, right?
Yep. But yeah, the ultimate goal for me is to recreate whatever the original thing was that made the person up.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of that, what are like common mistakes that you see around resource guarding? Like what should people not do that you see people do a lot?
No, we already said that. Don't stick your hands in the food bowl.
Yeah, don't stick your hands in the food bowl. Don't stick your hands in the crate. But like what else?
Do not alpha roll your dog on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Please. Because if you actually do have a dog who has some sort of actual aggression, it's not gonna go well for you. Let's talk about punishment events real quick, because sometimes resource guiding does sometimes require an actual punishment event. And I know you guys went over this whole thing. If it's an actual punishment event, it shouldn't have to happen multiple times.
Mm-hmm. At what point in resource guarding do you determine punishment is necessary? It depends.
Wow. It really depends. Well,
Okay.
this is not an easy subject, and we are not. But yeah, I think punishment can be helpful. I don't think it is ever absolutely necessary.
Mhm.
But I think it can be helpful for, especially if the person has a little bit of that anxiety in them, to actually have the thing where they're not doing it. I'm going to be the one doing it. They're not going to be taking their emotions out on the dog, but I'm going to be the one who goes, that's not a thing that we're doing. And that's it. And then we go back and we do it again. And the person goes, oh, they just needed to be told no.
And to set the scene here, guys, so if you have not already listened to the previous episode that Sam and I did on the 4 quadrants and punishment, when Skyler talks about punishment, I love that she said, we're not bringing our emotions out on the dog. Emotion should not be involved in punishment. And punishment does not need to be, nor should it be, painful or super scary, right? So the punishment is something that is going to get rid of a behavior, but we have to be fair and ethical to our dogs when we do. There's this trainer named Jay Jack, and he explained this in a way that I think makes a lot of sense to people. He calls it the line of aggression, right? So there's all the warning signals that dogs give: the staring, the hunching over something, snarling, growling, baring their teeth, hair going up. All of those are communication signals. They are not necessarily aggressive behavior in their own. They are like your prerequisite to aggression, basically. Punishment would come into play if the dog actually acts on aggression. I am going to do something to cause damage. That is where I would come in and go, okay, that is never okay. You cannot bite. You can growl at me, and that's information, and I don't like it, but I need to work on that. What do we fix? Do we fix your emotion? Do we fix our relationship? That's information. So I guess at least the way that I think of it is punishment would come in within certain circumstances. If the dog has acted on aggression, do not do this yourself at home, because another thing that can happen is dogs can do what we call a redirection. So if the dog is frustrated and you give a correction or a punishment, that dog can come back and attack you for it, not even necessarily intentionally, just out of frustration and act on instinct. So anytime that punishment is being used in resource guarding, it needs to be done by a professional for sure.
Yep. And I never let my clients do this the first time. It's never a thing where it's like, here's the reins. Like, you get to do this thing to your dog. And it's usually like a correction on an e-collar, usually a low correction on an e-collar, because we've already done the work leading up to that. Or like a pop on a brown collar. We're not doing anything crazy. We're not bringing dogs around. We're not hitting dogs. For the love of God, please don't hit your dog.
Do not do it. No abuse, people.
Unless it is in defense and your dog is trying to eat you.
If your dog's trying to maul you, your safety is first, but be fair to your dog. Emotion should not be a part of it. Sam and I have talked about this before. Punishment is meant to get rid of a behavior. Reinforcement builds it. So that doesn't mean that we need punishment to get rid of resource guarding. If we can build other behaviors, we do not need punishment. So Skyler and I are not saying, oh, your dog resource guards, let's punish them. I want to avoid that at all costs, especially with a resource guarder. I want no reason for there to be any conflict between human and dog. I want to make the relationship better. I don't even mean to say that punishment makes a relationship worse, because any healthy relationship has boundaries and you can say no. But punishments need to be very fair, but I would rather not get to that point. I'd rather work on all the little things and build the building blocks so that we create a lot of clarity and the dog just goes, oh, okay, I don't have to resource guard the pillow. And we don't want that, but we like to be transparent that it's there. Sometimes it may be called for.
let's also just say that, like, okay, so and I've actually had this happen. Copat used to do this to my old boyfriend. She would not let them in the bed with me. And I would take her little butt and I would push her off the bed, out of the pod.
Or you could just Grim used to do this with my husband, actually. He used to do the thing where my husband worked out of state. So Grim slept on the bed most nights. And then my husband would come home and Grim would run and jump into his spot on the bed before he could and lay down. And when my husband would, finish brushing his teeth and doing all that, he'd walk in the bedroom and Grim would give him those eyeballs. Like, he would never quite growl at him, but there was the stare, the same stare he does to get the other dogs away. And my husband would tell him to move and he wouldn't move. And if he kept staring at him, I would just say, no, that's my punishment marker. Inappropriate. You're not listening to him. And I would just calmly put him in his crate. And the crate wasn't the punishment. It's the access to the bed was taken away. Nope, you can't be up here if you're going to be a jerk. That is a punishment. So that's what Skyler and I are talking about, that it's not big, scary stuff. Usually, especially resource guarding, it's going to be negative punishment. Access denied. You can't have that anymore. All right, Skyler. So let's talk about realistic expectations in regards to resource guarding. Is it always possible to get rid of it?
No.
Is it sometimes possible to get rid of it?
Depending on where it stems from. So yes.
Okay. And I think that goes back to that spectrum that dogs can have, right? Like a mild resource guarder that maybe it was a learned behavior, probably fixable. But the dog that is genetically programmed to be that way and is very serious about it, I'm never going to be the dog trainer that says, oh yeah, we can get this dog to where they're totally safe around kids.
Yeah. If a dog learns to resource guard something, they're likely to resource guard something else in the future. And honestly, if you've gone through all the protocols with a professional trainer of some sort, they're probably going to pick something that you don't care about, and you're never honestly going to notice that they are resource guarding, like a specific toy or something like that. Because they're probably not going to do it to a degree to you that it's going to matter. But on the other side, yeah, if a dog learns to do it, they're probably going to do it again at some point.
Yeah. And it just comes down to realistic expectations, right? So if I have a dog that's a serious resource guarder, I'm not saying they can never live safely in the right home, but I'm probably never going to trust them around small children unsupervised with a bunch of toys and food on the floor, because it's always safety first. Once a dog has shown that tendency of behavior, I'm always going to assume that it is there because I want everybody to be safe. Now, what I see happen sometimes, I had one person once, it was a Rottweiler, big resource guarder, big dog, big mouth, big teeth, big resource guarder. That is a very dangerous situation. If I have a Chihuahua resource guarding, it's not as big of a deal. So she called me, we did a consultation, and I told her, I was very honest, and I told her, look, I am more than happy to work with you, but we need to be very realistic and set our expectations for safety, not for this dog to have full freedom of the house and furniture and safe around the kids. And she didn't like that. So she talked to some other trainers, and she came back to me and she said, well, I talked to this trainer who I will not name, and they told me that we can get rid of it. And I said, okay, well, how? Because I'm always open-minded, right? Like, if you can teach me something that I don't know, or if this guy sounds legit, I'll go talk to him. So she's like, oh, he was telling me how we have to, basically they were going to punish or correct the growls, the snarls, all the little things. That to me is a big red flag, because when you punish the warning signs, the communication signal, the dog learns not to growl, but that doesn't fix how they feel about the scenario. And now we get the dog that jumps to a bite. Oh, they bit out of nowhere. Well, that's because you told them they can't give you the warning signs.
Yeah. Not to say I don't use positive punishment in some resource guarding cases, but there are a lot of online dog trainers that showcase certain things with resource guarding dogs that look really good in the videos. So they're going to show your dog walking up to the food bowl. They're going to have the e-collar on the dog, and they're going to stim the dog until the dog walks away. Right? Then they're going to show the dog 2 weeks later. They're going to tell the dog out or whatever their word is. The dog immediately going to walk away from that thing. Yes, it works. Sort of. Because you're not creating a better mental stability with your dog there. And more times than not, that dog will actually escalate as soon as it realizes that you colors.
Yep. I'm not against remote collars when used properly with high quality equipment. I don't like the $20 ones off of Amazon, and I don't like to use them in incorrect ways. There's a spectrum. There are dog trainers that are very put an e-collar on it and do an e-collar for everything. And there are dog trainers that think they're just terrible. I fall somewhere in the middle. I do like remote collars for certain things. I tend to not like them as much for big behavior problems, mainly because what happens when you don't have it or it dies? If you don't have a backup plan and you don't learn how to safely handle your dog and communicate with your dog and train your dog without that, you're going to run into a problem when your equipment fails or when you forgot to put it on or turn it on before you put it on the dog. So even when we are using things like that, if you guys listening are working with a trainer that does that, you have to make sure that they're teaching you what to do without it too.
I figured I should put that out there because it sounded very similar.
Mm-hmm.
The Rottweiler we're gonna experience.
Skyler, do you want to talk about a hot topic or would you prefer not to?
Let's do it.
Sam and I are planning eventually to do an episode on rehoming because I think that's a very important topic that gets a lot of hate for people rehoming their dogs. I know that I personally, there are certain times when people come to me for resource guarding that I'm going to recommend rehoming the dog. And it's not a fun conversation to have. And it never stems from, I just want you to get rid of your dog. Never, ever. Oh, people need to realize that our job as dog trainers is to assess the situation and to keep the people safe. Like I tell my client, the other day I was working with a client. It was not resource guarding. It was just a very, very reactive dog. And we were working on leash stuff. And she wrapped the leash around her hand. And I told her, hey, if you do that, you are at risk of your hand breaking if he pulls you hard enough. That is a very unsafe way to hold your leash. And I showed her the proper way to hold a leash. And she said, well, MJ, I'm just really not comfortable with that. I'm more comfortable holding it this way. And I told her, look, my job is to keep you safe first. I understand that your top priority is keeping your dog safe. My top priority is keeping you safe. If you choose to hold your leash like that, that is totally fine. But it's my job to give you the information needed to be safe. And I take that with me into resource guarding. So if I assess a situation and I truly think the dog is a danger to the humans it lives with, the other animals it lives with, maybe future little humans that'll come to visit, nieces, nephews, kids, stuff like that, I will tell the human that and be very honest. And it's not a fun conversation, but I do think that having a dog in the wrong household doesn't mean you're a bad household. It just means that the match is not quite there and that this dog is either a danger to you, a danger to themselves, or is just going to cause you an undue amount of stress for a very long time. And that's not good for you or the dog.
Yeah. I don't recommend rehoming. I tend to go the step further.
Yeah. And I know exactly where you're going with that. And I mostly agree. I think that when I'm wording it to clients, I'll start there because then once I can get that baby step of, I don't think you are the right home for your dog. And for those listening, I'm not saying you are not. Like Skyler and I are talking the extreme cases here.
Yes.
So most, I would say 90, if not 95% of people that have ever contacted me for resource guarding, sure, let's do training, no problem. It's every now and then you get the really serious dogs, the rare dogs. If the dog is not safe in your house, my first thing I need to get across to you is that it's not safe in your house. But then we have to tackle the bridge of, is this dog safe in anybody's house?
Yep. Yep. And sometimes, like, you are correct. Like, sometimes it's just not the right person for that dog. Like, sometimes this dog is just too much. I did actually have one where the dog wasn't terrible, but the way that she was resource guarding, and she was resource guarding her owner, I told her, like, he will come in. She goes in the other room. Like, that's just what happens. Well, it was giving this poor woman so much anxiety to put the dog in the other room because she felt so bad for the dog. And then she felt isolated. So then we had to have a conversation of like, okay, so is this the right home for this dog? Because she really wasn't that bad. But also, can you give up your emotions about the dog, about putting the dog in the room versus your emotions about like if you can't put the dog in your room, you can't have people over right now. And it wasn't a forever. I mean, it was the right now thing, but it was giving her so much anxiety. And I felt so bad for this woman, but right, it wasn't a good fit as far as that is.
That can be a really, really tough thing for all of us to accept. Emotions play a bigger role in dog training than you would think. When we have a human that is struggling with big emotions, big anxiety, big nervousness, big hesitation, sometimes that is a roadblock to successful dog training. And there are some people where we can explain that and they can work on it. And I don't mean get over it in a cold way, but they can work through it to make sure that that does not get in the way. But there are some people that are really struggle with anxiety. And because of that, they can't ever get through to their dog and do the things they need to do for the dog to be successful. And then let's say we have a 2-year-old dog. Let's say that dog lives to be 12 years old. For 10 years, if that dog and human are both living in a very high stress state, people will think that it's more appropriate for that dog to stay in that home because dogs are forever and you shouldn't give them up. But what if that dog that was not a serious danger to everybody, maybe it was just a danger in that scenario, or it was just a big stress, but a different home without kids, with a quieter setting could have been better. That could be 10 years that now that dog lives much more peacefully and stress-free that we prevented the dog from having because we had too much pride to let the dog go. Now, behavioral euthanasia is the word that nobody likes to hear. I had this conversation the other day, a little less formally. It wasn't a formal client of mine, but it was just somebody in the dog world kind of asking, do you think that this is appropriate here? The dog had proved to be a danger to multiple people. It was several bites spanning years causing damage. And it was actually the town was going to get together to talk about what to do with this dog. They can't safely put it in a home knowing the damage it's caused. So the dog's options were to live in a shelter setting where the shelter staff were at risk, or what we call behavioral euthanasia, where the dog very peacefully gets put to sleep to keep everybody safe. And that is such a hard thing to do. It is such a hard decision to have on your shoulders. But again, if we think about it, that dog was young. If he lived the next 10 years in a shelter setting where he is going to be very stressed and upset and not get daily, the shelter, they do the best they can, but they don't have the staff to care for a dog that can only be handled by a few people. So then it becomes, okay, well, now this dog lives a very mediocre, subpar life where his needs are not met because we don't have the courage needed to make a hard decision. And that gets very hard.
Yep. I tell people, because I've lived with Coconut, she's 14, 15 now. I've had her since she was a year old. And this dog does not bite people anymore. But for the first probably 5 years, she would have gone after almost anybody, or almost any even.
Now, let me ask you a question really quick.
Yep.
She doesn't bite people anymore because she lives with you, a professional dog trainer that knows how to manage her and set up her routine and lifestyle. Do you think, I hope this does not happen, but hypothetically speaking, let's just say tomorrow you were no longer with us and somebody else had to take your dog. So animal control comes, they take your dogs, they rehome them. Would Coconut be safe in just any home tomorrow?
Absolutely not. And it is in my if I die plan that she will get behaviorally used. It has been since I was 19, so about 12 years. This dog cannot be with other people. I have the resources and the capability of taking care of her so that she has never gotten an actual bite on anybody. But it also has been so incredibly stressful for me to do this for the last 13 years. And that is what I have to tell other clients who have dogs who are similarly, like, your dog is never going to get better. I'm sure you get this one from Grim.
Yep.
Where you have to tell people, like, hey, I lived with this for this 20 years. And this is kind of the strain that it puts on me. And I just want you to know what you're getting into. And if you choose to do that, that is absolutely wonderful. And you are a wonderful person. But also, if you choose not to do that, it does not make you a bad person.
Right. Sam and I are going to talk about this way in detail one day. But so I came from the shelter world first. And I'm a big believer that you tend to believe what the people around you believe, right? But the a dog is forever thing. I really, truly used to believe that from the bottom of my heart. There is absolutely nothing that could justify giving your dog up once you have chosen to adopt them. And then I had to rehome a dog. And it wasn't even that I had to. And I'll tell that story another day. He lives an amazing life with a home that is so much of a better fit for him than I was. And I cried myself to sleep every day for a month trying to make that decision. And everything worked out for the best. But it really, truly is not worth it for the dog to live in a home that is not the best fit for them, right? So I used to truly believe you keep a dog forever. And it took me getting into behavior and seeing the worst case scenarios to understand that that is not at all a bad thing for you to decide if it's not right for you. You cannot take care of your dog if you are pouring from an empty cup. As cliche as that sounds, if you are overworked, overstressed, and even though you love your dog, you can love your dog and resent your dog at the exact same time. You can love your dog and how they make you feel at home in the safety of your living room, and despise that you can't go on play dates with your friends and their dogs. You can't have guests come over to your house. You can't have your nieces and nephews, your grandchildren come visit. Those can exist at the exact same time. So it is okay to love your dog with every ounce of your being and also decide that you are not what's best for them. And it does not make you a bad dog owner. It makes you an amazing dog owner if you can make that decision.
Yep.
Anything else you want to touch on with resource guarding?
I do want to say to those people who are dealing with this silently, because I have learned that resource guarding is the thing that people do not talk about.
Mm-hmm.
If it is something that is happening and you are more vocal to your friend or your family or stuff about it, it will make it more normalized, and it'll make it more likely that people will actually call down trainings, and that would be really good.
Yeah. Make it normal. Because it's a normal dog behavior. I can almost guarantee that 99% of dogs in households, they all do it to some extent. It's just when it becomes a big problem that it is known. So
There's a lot of
with
shame
friends.
behind it.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be. It is so normal.
No, there really shouldn't be. It's very normal.
I love that when I go to somebody's house and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, my dog does insert normal dog behavior here. Jumps, plays tug really rough, gets muddy paws on my jacket. And I'm like, I'm a dog trainer. If your dog did not bark, I would be concerned. Everybody knows where to find me and Sam. What about you, Skyler?
I am on Facebook and Instagram at Redemption Dog Training LLC.
And you're in Aztec, New Mexico, right?
Aztec, New Mexico. I'm between Durango, Colorado, and Farmington, New Mexico, since nobody seems to know where Aztec is.
That's true, because I didn't know where it was. I do know where Durango is. It's really pretty there. I've been there.
Exactly.
Hey, Skyler, thanks for coming, and we will talk to you next time.